If you've saved $1 million for retirement, you might be wondering, is it enough? Can you actually retire comfortably on $1 million in today's world of inflation, market uncertainty, and the rising healthcare costs? The answer is yes, but only if you follow the right process. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you the 5-step process and plan that shows you exactly how to turn $1 million into a retirement that feels secure and enjoyable. I'm also going to be sharing a real life example of a couple who retired with exactly $1 million and are now living the retirement of their dreams without any additional financial stress. And in step 4, I'll show you how you might be able to pay almost no taxes in retirement using a lesser known strategy. All right, here's the big problem. Too many people hit retirement age thinking that $1 million is a golden ticket, but they forget that that money has to last them for 30 plus years. It has to stretch through recessions, inflation, unexpected costs, and sometimes your own costly mistakes. And according to a Vanguard study in 2024, the average 401k balance for someone aged 60 to 64 is $256,000, which tells us something important. If you have $1 million saved, you're already way ahead of the curve. But being ahead doesn't mean that you're invincible. You still need a strategy, and without one, $1 million can be gone in 15 years. But with the right plan, it can last the rest of your life and even leave a legacy. So here's what I recommend. Step 1, you need to understand what your retirement number is, and it cannot just be a guess. This number is how much income you'll need from your portfolio and how much it will have to generate every single year. So let's take this example. Suppose that you need to spend $80,000 per year in retirement. That includes housing, food, travel, gifts, and all the other lifestyle expenses that you care about. You estimate that Social Security will provide $30,000 per year starting at age 67, which leaves about $50,000 that you'll need to come from your savings each and every year. So with a $1 million portfolio, that's a 5% withdrawal rate, which is just a little bit above that traditional 4% rule. But if you plan well and maybe spend less in the early years or have some sort of part-time income for a while, it can still work out. In fact, a client that I worked with had $1 million saved, but also had a paid-off home and only needed $55,000 per year to live on. So with $25,000 in Social Security, she only needed $30,000 from her investments, which is a 3% withdrawal rate. And knowing that made all the difference in her confidence levels. Her number was personal, and your number needs to be personal as well. And that's the key. Forget all the internet calculators and all of the retirement rules of thumb and build your budget and factor in your fixed income sources and target a sustainable withdrawal rate based on your goals and your time horizons. Step 2 is to build a dynamic withdrawal strategy, not just a static one. The old way of advice said just withdraw 4% of your portfolio every year and adjust for inflation, but that doesn't consider what happens when markets are down. If you withdraw too much during a bad market, you lock in those losses and they're really hard to recover from. So something called sequence of return risk comes into play and becomes an issue. And if you delay Social Security early in retirement, your withdrawal rate will likely need to be higher than 4% to meet your needs. So what do? Well, you can use a guardrails approach. So for example, in your strong years or when the market's doing well, maybe you can withdraw 5%. And when the market's down, you can pull less, maybe 3%, and rely more heavily on your cash reserves during that time. You adjust your withdrawals based on market performance and your own life changes and perhaps tax brackets. And in fact, I had a client in 2022 when the market was down who paused withdrawals from their IRA and lived more on cash savings throughout that year. This gave his portfolio time to recover instead of pulling from it when it was down 20%. And a year later, his portfolio rebounded and he resumed distributions without locking in those losses. The flexibility of this approach can extend the life of your portfolio dramatically and reduce the chances of ever running out of money. Step 3 is to segment your investments based on time horizon. This is what I often call a bucketing strategy, and it's one of the best ways to manage risk and still invest for growth over the long term. So if you have $1 million, we can break that down into 3 separate buckets. Bucket number 1 is your cash bucket, and this is for years 1 and 2. This is your income now bucket, and it's designed to be safe in things like cash, CDs, or high yield savings. Bucket number 2 is for years 3 through 5, and this is your midterm money, and this is where you want to hold fixed income such as U.S. Treasuries, corporate bonds, and the like. It's designed to carry more risk than cash, but also be a vehicle that's not invested in the stock market. And bucket number 3 is for any income that you might need 5 years from now or later. This is your long-term growth engine. This is where you can afford to be more aggressive, and this is where you want to invest in equities to create that long-term growth that helps outpace inflation. Now, why is it important to structure your portfolio in this way in retirement? Well, I had a client that retired in 2019 and had this kind of strategy in place, and when when COVID hit in 2020 and the markets dropped, she didn't panic. And the reason why is because her near-term income was sitting in cash. It was untouched by the market, didn't go up and down. That confidence helped her stay invested, and by the end of 2020, her growth bucket had already bounced back. This approach lets you ride out market volatility without sacrificing that long-term growth and those long-term goals. It gives you the peace of mind that you need in the short term and also increases your odds of success 30 years down the road. Now, step 4 is when things start to get fun. This is when you want to be tax smart in retirement. Many people think that taxes go away whenever they stop working, but that's simply not true. In fact, without planning, you might end up paying more in tax in retirement than you did while you were working. So let's say that you have $1 million in mostly tax-deferred IRAs or 401ks, but you also have just a little bit of money in a taxable brokerage account. Well, every time that you withdraw money from your traditional IRA, you're going to be taxed as normal income on that distribution. And once RMDs, or required minimum distributions, kick in at either age 73 or 75, you must start pulling money from that taxable income source, whether you need that money or not. But what if you planned ahead? You could delay Social Security and fill up that lower tax bracket with Roth conversions to reduce those future RMDs during your gap years. And once you do get to RMD age, you can use something called a qualified charitable distribution, or QCD for short, and you can take money directly from your IRA and give that to a charity and reduce your taxable income, but also fulfill that required minimum distribution. Or you can do something called tax gain harvesting, where you intentionally realize capital gains in that brokerage account at a 0% long-term capital gain rate. And all of this helps you create a tax efficient income plan, and ultimately this keeps you under certain income thresholds that would keep you from triggering those IRMAA surcharges and help you pay less on your Medicare premiums. It could also help you pay less on your Social Security benefits. And as proof of this working, a retired couple that I worked with converted $50,000 per year from their IRA to their Roth IRA for 5 years before they got to RMD age, and by doing so, they kept their income low and avoided bumping into those higher brackets. Now, what happens here is their Roth is growing tax-free and their future RMDs are going to be so much smaller, so they're going to pay far less in taxes over their lifetime than they would have had they just let that money stay in the IRA without any conversion. So with tax smart planning, you could actually stretch that $1 million much further and potentially leave more for your future heirs in a tax-free manner. Step 5 is don't underestimate healthcare cost. And this is one of the biggest blind spots in most retirement plans. According to Fidelity, the average 65-year-old couple today needs to have around $315,000 to cover healthcare expenses in retirement. And that doesn't even include long-term care. If you retire before 65, you'll need to bridge that gap until Medicare kicks in. So you're gonna have to have private insurance, and that can cost upwards of $10,000 to $20,000 per year, depending on how your situation lines up. After 65, you'll need to choose between Medicare Advantage and Medigap. Plus, you'll have to have Part D or a drug plan. And all of this needs to be budgeted, because I had a client who thought that Medicare was free, and they were shocked to find out that they had to pay for Part B, Part D, and a Medigap plan. And the total cost of that annually was over $6,000. So we adjusted their plan to account for that and help them use their HSA to fund those costs and pay for that in a tax-free capacity. And also around health insurance, you've got to think about long-term care, because even in just a few years in a facility, it could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. So whether you buy insurance or you self-insure, you need to have a strategy in place. And when you use this 5-step process, you can enjoy retirement like John and Linda, who were 62 when they retired with $1 million. They were nervous, markets were shaky, and they weren't sure their savings was going to last. But they built a plan. They delayed their Social Security until 67. They lived off a mix of cash and small IRA withdrawals in those early years. They did some small partial Roth conversions to fill up that 12% tax bracket. They used a bucketing strategy to help avoid selling during those market downturns, and planned out Medicare and bought a Medigap plan when they turned 65. Now, 10 years later, they've traveled, they've gifted their grandkids, they've weathered 2 different down markets, and their portfolio is still around $950,000. Why? Because, well, they didn't rely just on having $1 million. They thoughtfully planned out their retirement using a tax-smart approach, and in doing so have lived worry-free and even saved thousands of dollars by doing this. So retiring with $1 million is absolutely possible, but the secret isn't in the number, it's in the plan. And if you're unsure of where to start or just need help with your plan, you can click the link down in the description below to schedule a free strategy session with me. Don't leave your future to chance. Let's turn your hard-earned savings into the retirement of your dreams. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.